Hello and welcome to the Frogalore podcast. My name is Jason,
Hey, this is Jim.
And this is Dustin.
and in this episode, we're just going to hang out. A lot of things have happened over the holidays. All of us, I think, have dealt with some form of sickness over the last month or so. I've got a new grandbaby. Dustin and Jim, obviously, with their kids, things always going on, and our schedules haven't worked out too well. So we've got a short bit of time. We want to just get together and more or less catch up with everything that's been going on as far as Warmachine in our lives or just our lives in general. We're just going to hang out and chat. So with that, if you guys don't mind, I was going to start off with a little something that I'm going through right now. I'd gotten into a bit of a funk. I posted about it online and I won't get into it too much here, but between being sick and, family stuff and work, and we hadn't been able to play for a couple weeks. And when I came back to everything, it was like, well, do I paint the Mark IV stuff I have that I don't have enough to make a list for yet because we only have battle groups? Do I paint some other stuff to have prime lists for what we have? Do I just work on a bat rep with old stuff? Really was stuck trying to figure out what to do and finally decided, I had some complaints about people wanting to see quote unquote proper Mark IV lists on the bat reps. So I said, I sat down, Don and I, and figured out what we need to get the minimum with what we already had painted and built 50-point list ready for my cricks and her circle, and start on that. I got my cricks knocked out late December. And it's going to be a list with Goreshade and some Banes, and Donna is going to be running Chromac as her first Warlock, along with Getorix, which will be the first actual character, Jack or Beast, either of us will run, so that's going to be fun. I don't know anything about the Thorn or Chromac or Getorix because all the circle, she mostly is a circle player. I dabbled with it a little bit. It was mostly just beast heavy stuff and right along the lines of the Black Clads and the Druids and not getting into the Reeves, not getting into the Tharn. So I started reading into it, and it's fascinating. Not just Getorix's story is such a sad heartbreak, and because Morvana is she's a very bad word. Man, she was awful. And I never realized that. So the Tharn apparently had, and Jim, I think you're a bit more knowledgeable about Circle, so correct me or jump in any time. The Tharn had the curse of 10 ills that made them basically infertile. And so their race was, they were going to die out eventually. Morvana came along and cured them of that. And most of them then, swore an allegiance to her. Because the Tharn, they're more aligned with the Devourer. Well, not more. They are aligned with the Devourer Worm, where the Black Clads are more in line with just nature itself and Orboros, and they see the chaos and destruction of the worm as more of a tool. They don't really worship the worm. Most of them did. Getorix basically said, no, kick rocks. I'm not doing that. And he didn't bend the knee. And she basically, Chromac, handle your boy. And so they battle almost to the death where both of them are just beat down, but Chromac happens to be the victor. And this is where it gets really dirty because there's warp wolves, which are normal humans who drink the warp wolf elixir and they can make the transformation. And they don't do that with Tharn because Tharn already have that tie to the worm. She made Chromac witness her forcing the beatdown Getorix go through that process, and he became very powerful, probably arguably one of the most powerful warp wolves ever, but it fractured his brain. And, he just went nuts, slaughtered much of his tribe, including his own wife and children, not purposely, knowingly, but just out of his mind. Just tore through the forest, a path of destruction. And once again, Chromac, your dude's doing it again. And he's got to hunt him down and, again, beat him into submission. And now, because of that, Getorix, he's just got this loyalty and this allegiance to Chromac. But like I was reading something about how, like when a warp wolf howls, the savagery of it, and it sends chills of terror down people's spine. When Getorix howls, you hear pain. You hear the sorrow. Like every battle he's in, he's reliving the destruction he reaped on his own people, and it's so intense and dark and crazy. So yeah, that's what I was just reading about recently as far as getting into the lore.
And I don't know that Morvana is necessarily a bad person. She's just very goal-oriented, and she knows what's needed for the will of Orboros. And she doesn't care who she walks on in the process to get there. But Yeah, the whole story behind Ginrex, it's kind of a big tragedy, and it was also an example to Chromac to kind of keep him in line too, which is kind of a cool underside to it.
That is something about how, what I was reading, it was about how her doing that, it wasn't just that she made him go through the transformation, she made Chromac witness it, kind of keeping him in line, kind of keeping him and look, I saw her as just being just a witch, just an awful person. But I get what you're saying as far as to her, everything's just a means to an end. But and again, we talked about this a couple episodes back. How many actual good people are there in the Warmachine universe? There really aren't that many, and that's part of what makes all these characters so interesting. Even the quote unquote good guys have something about them that's not so great.
So to expand a little bit on what you said as far as the burnout, like I think Dustin and I went through a little bit of that as well too, and it was more just because we didn't get much time to play. For me, it was a lot of my favorite factions. Their lists got released. I wasn't real thrilled with the casters chosen for my factions. It's not that I'm going to give them up. It's just not who I was expecting. So I've got to kind of look at this new setup and what they do and try to figure out the new synergies with it. So for me, what I did was I actually got a new faction as much as I swore I wasn't going to do anymore. So I went with the scout for the Mercs, Magnus. And I thought I'm just going to build me a small scout list so we can get to play this. And if anyone knows me, nothing ever stays small when it comes to gaming. And before you know it, I had a 50 point, a 75 point, and then actually for Christmas I got the final piece needed to actually hit 100 points. But having a new faction and a new set of eyes and not having to readjust my old factions to the new style has been a big breath of fresh air. In fact, I'm currently painting up the list to try to give me a little bit of a buffer in between editions, so I don't feel like I'm trying to go from Mark III to Mark IV. I'm just going to start Mark IV with a new faction, and then after I get this painted, I'm going to move over to my new Khador, the actual new battle box that was for Gen Con, and trying to get all that finished painting. But that's a lot of pieces involved with the magnetized arms and whatnot. But it helped to reinvigorate my love for the game, to just take a step back, try a different faction, and go in it with fresh eyes.
What about you, Dustin? What have you been up to the last month or so?
Well, mostly just assembling models. I had placed a pretty beefy order when the Dusk box went live on the site, and they've been kind of trickling in here and there. My Signor First Army list is assembled. That probably took forever. Probably a good 30 to 50 models total. There's still a few that I haven't got assembled yet. We've gotten a couple games in since our last episode. Got Darius on the table with his list, and that was a lot of fun and very different from what I'm used to playing. Just running a gun line in general versus big, beefy, sword wielding people. It was definitely an interesting matchup and required a lot different line of thought. Otherwise, I've not really touched a paintbrush since like October because of breathing issues and stuff like that. And I'm currently trying to get back into the swing of things and find that motivation to get stuff painted. I still have my Signar Gen Con box sitting on my desk, just staring at me, half painted. I just need to wrap that up and then move on to something else. Otherwise, I started a giant print project for a table design that I was looking at. That was basically a 4 foot by 4 foot cityscape with multiple like tiers of city and a small canal that ran through it and a little park. And I think I sat down and looked at the overall length of time it's going to take to actually print the entire thing. Basically going to be an entire month worth of printing. So I'm hoping to, while I'm getting that printed, that I can get it painted up as I go so that I don't have this giant paint project come the end of it. But I think it's going to be really interesting playing in a cityscape versus, out in the forest or anything. So we'll definitely see how that one ends up going.
That's incredible. just thinking about the idea of the entire table being one place. Because when we set our tables up, I try to mix up the different types of terrain. So we'll have some forest over here, and then we'll have some buildings over here. So it's like there's a city on the outskirts of a forest or something, but the idea of it all being one location. Don and I were playing around with some ideas a while back for if we wanted a more urban terrain piece that functioned like a forest. And one of the ideas I had was not a loading dock, I guess, because it's on the ground, but like a storage area. So it'd be a storage area that would be like a bunch of crates. And so the crates provide your concealment because you're hiding behind them. They're empty wooden crates. They're not solid where it would give you cover. And they also affected line of sight as far as seeing in and out or seeing on the other side. So it functioned exactly like a forest, but it was just this little area that was, say, I don't know, kidney bean shaped or whatever. And we would just have removable crates stacks that we could put in and out just like you would have trees.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a way to approach that. Using the same mechanics but different aesthetics. One thing that I like about the artists who did these pieces is that it's all designed in tiles. It ends up being like almost 300 tiles that are, I think they're 60 centimeters by 60 centimeters. But like they have the canal tiles, they have a park tile, they have regular road tiles and stuff. So it's like easily you can throw in water elements into the cityscape via the canal. You can throw in parts of the parks here and there throughout the map, so that you still have that area that makes sense for there to be a forest, like a legitimate actual forest. Then, of course, like you had said, throwing in things like warehouses or things like that represent the same mechanics, just different aesthetics. Not 100% sure what I'm going to be doing with the buildings quite yet, because I don't want to make it too overcrowded, but at the same time, I want there to be interesting charging lanes and multiple ways that you can approach different areas of the map and everything.
Well, and another thing we've always talked about is we've always wanted a narrative campaign, and this will give us the opportunity to do it and not just be, oh, we're trekking through the forest, oh, we're trekking through the woods, and then through the plains and the river. Now we have an ability to mix it up a little bit and make it more interesting. So we haven't decided yet the full gamut of what that's going to entail, but hopefully soon we'll have a narrative campaign to talk about.
I like the idea of mixing things up to have things that make sense foliage wise. And like you can have a vegetable garden. Tall stalks of plants in it would replicate trees as far as blocking vision, and even like a little park inside of a city. So you can have some things like that. You've actually got my mind spinning now with different ideas for different type of terrain that you could make inside of a city that would still act the same way as the more open table that we're used to.
My goal at one point is to make a giant temple that is basically on a hill, and just have what I picture when I read about Fiora and Pyrrhus and Krios and that final showdown between them, her coming down the stairs, like I imagine this like elevated temple and her just rushing down. It's kind of like I want to make that as a table scene just to see how it actually would end up playing out.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that maybe like on our first or second episode that Don and I had an idea, not the same as what you're talking about, but maybe I guess a little smaller scale, where you would have just the front facade of a temple that she would be holding, and there's certain points on the map that between my deployment zone and hers, I'd be playing scoring against her protectorate, and I'm trying to get through there. And if I can get to and hold certain spots during certain rounds, so holding a spot very far back late in the game doesn't particularly help. But we also played with the idea of she would start with a certain amount of points. So if I didn't get a caster kill, I would have to score X points. So I couldn't just hide back and not be engaged. So we kind of play with the idea of building something like that. But my problem is I have so many ideas and so little time. So that's something I'm going to talk about a little later on. But just the fact that I would like to do that, but there's just so much I need to get done and trying to find the time to actually do it. I'll never feel bad about not getting hobby time because of family. That's never going to happen. I couldn't ask for a better situation right now. We have a brand new, just turned a month old on Monday, grandson who's doing well and is healthy, and mom's home and healthy. And and we got to go. Actually, we spent the night at their house Christmas Eve, which is the first time we've ever spent the night at either of our kids' places. And the point was to wake up the next morning, and we were able to help out with our 4-year-old granddaughter then, as far as them being able to enjoy Christmas. They didn't have the concern of, we didn't want them to be worrying about being up all night feeding him every few hours, and then our granddaughter Everly wake up and they just gone to bed an hour before, and she's ready to open gifts or whatever. So we offered, we said, look, how about if we go spend the night? We can keep her busy if she gets up before y'all are up and ready, and then we can all just go do that. And then my son and I got to cook breakfast for everybody. Neither of us work as cooks, but we both love to cook. He's much better at it than me. So that was just a real good time for he and I to do that. And as I got the time, I was able to get back into things. I was dealing with so much. Guilt's not the right word, but I guess it's the only one that fits. Like I said, I mean, I got things that were gifted to me, and I haven't put paint on them yet, and I feel awful for that. We bought 3 of the Mark IV sets, Dust, Kador, and Signor, and then I was fortunate enough that PP gifted the Orgoth battle group to us. And I got them primed, and I started putting paint on one of the models, and then, I've got to get a bat rep done this month. So I put all the painting aside and start working on that. Donna really needs this model on her list, so I start painting that up. And so I've made the decision. I've actually got my little to-do list. Once I get Chromac finished, which I'm hoping I'll have him done in the next week or so, and then after that, I'm going to start with the Orgoth battle group.
With Mark IV and the rule changes, I've seen myself going more for the scenario because of how things are different. And some of the scenario that we've been playing, we did the messenger one that came out. That really changed my gameplay a lot because I had to try to get up there and get the flags and not get eliminated in the process and still have enough to get out of the game without having my entire force wiped out. Whereas normally I'm just like, well, I'm running out of forces. I'm just going to go for the assassin kill. If I lose, so be it. So it's been an interesting change of pace trying to unlock those new strategies and figure out what I can do with this army.
That messenger game was the first game we've played that actually went all the rounds available. Normally we end either with assassin, or I think once or twice we've ended with points, but that was probably the longest game we've actually played. But it was a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what other alternative scenarios like that they end up coming up with. Probably doesn't also help that since Mark IV, I've been keeping my caster a bit farther away from you, so it's probably a little harder to do the caster kill. That, and they tend to be in a nice, thick, solid suit of armor like Darius or Sorsha, so that probably doesn't help there either.
That's one of the things about the list that Donna and I are getting ready to start running. This is the first time we've both run casters that were, I'm saying casters, but Chromac being a warlock, that are big. Gorshade being a 40 mil base and Chromac being a 50 mil base. Our casters, they're roughly the size of Warjacks and Beast, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And Chromac is really beefy, just looking over his stats and stuff. I'm curious to see what she's going to do because her list is actually pretty small. It's 1 solo, 1 3-man unit, Chromac, and then 2 heavy beast. So, and that's a 50-point list. The beast are Getorix and a pureblood Warpwolf, so 16-point and a 15-point. That's more than half your list right there. So I'm curious to see what she can do with it and what I can do against it.
Yeah, my Merck list is very, very Warjack heavy. I've thrown some units in there just to have some bodies, but Magnus likes running Warjacks, so I don't have a very big force, and it's been interesting trying to figure that piece out. I mean, I have a couple of big AoEs, which has helped because I run a couple Mariners and a couple Renegades, but sitting back and shooting AoEs out there doesn't win the game, so I've had to figure out what course I have to take and how to get Magnus up there, which is kind of hard. Like Dustin said, he's gotten better about protecting everything, so it's hard for me to get him in where I need to get him, but yet still play the long game as well.
So I will say it is one of my favorite things to do in any of our games is to get you into that corner and see what you do and see how, if I could get out of the whatever mess that I've caused at that point, to see if I can survive. Because every game it seems like that it's something else that you pull up out of your sleeve that pulls you closer to the win anyway.
Coming completely out of left field with a different subject, and Dustin, I'm gonna kind of rib you a little bit when I say this, but I'm doing it with love because I'm picking on myself too. About I did the same exact thing with a different character.
And Jim started it, just so you know. That's what he called it.
I've always heard it pronounced Getorix. Now, granted, I'm not gonna say I heard that from someone specifically at PP, but just from different bat reps. But the way Dustin says it is
Gatorix.
right, and you put the emphasis on the middle syllable then more, so the or. And I'm just busting your balls because I always said exemplar water Elias Gade. Don't know why. That's just how it sounded to me. That's how I read it. And Tried and True, they're one of the podcasts I really enjoy. And I think it was episode 16 where they had Matt Getz from PP on there and they were talking about things. And somewhere in there, he mentions Elias Gade. And my heart sank. And I went, oh, I'm a big dummy. I've been saying that wrong forever. And Don and I played about a week later. And we were playing Protectorate. And I cannot bring myself to call him Elias. Dustin just keeps saying Gatorix. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And that's a hill I'm going to die on. His name is Elias Gade when I say it. When we play it, when I put in my bat reps, I'm just going to have to be wrong.
I don't blame you. Elias sounds much cooler than Elias. But I also will say that Gatorix sounds much more intimidating than Getorix.
No, you're right there. No, you're right there because if you think about that, the Thar names have like really, I don't know a better word than just powerful, beefy, strong, Chromac. They've got a lot of K, G, they've got a lot of really strong consonants and sounds in their name. So putting the emphasis on the or in the middle of it definitely sounds more intimidating. You're not wrong at all there.
And I'm going to go on the record and say that, just fair warning, I'm going to call him something different every time. I'm really bad about that with all kinds of names. So fair warning, it's coming. That was one of the first matches we ever did. Was I ran Chromac 2 and Gatorix was in there.
Yeah, it wasn't Getorix. It was Gatorix that was with him.
Yeah.
For sure. And off to the sideline, scouting from the wood line was Elias Gade. He wasn't involved in the game. He was just scouting for Protectorate to get the news back of what was going on.
Yeah, and somewhere back at home, under the Protectorate watch, Elias was out of the picture entirely.
He was taking a nap.
Yeah, as somebody with Elias, sorry if that's your name, would probably do.
Well, looking at the clock right now, I know Dustin's got some stuff he's got to take care of, and really we just wanted this to be just a catch up. I mean, we messaged in our group chat a bit, but even that had been kind of silent during the holidays because we were all so busy with different things between work and family. So we wanted this to be a little catch up just between us, but also just sharing what we were doing as far as not just the game, but the hobby surrounding the game, and kind of honestly, like we talked about personally, what we were doing as far as, like I was talking about the stress I was feeling and you guys and some of the burnout because you're trying to figure out what to do with the list and finally getting that. So I'm excited. I feel rejuvenated getting back to the painting table. There was a bunch of garbage going on with the company that puts out the videoing software I use for the bat rep and the podcast. So I've made a complete switch to another more stable, more trustworthy piece of software and company. There's going to be a little bit of a delay. My next bat rep probably later this month, but once that happens, it'll be good because I'll be good to go with that. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point. If there's anything either you guys want to add, I just want to say thank you again to anyone who's listening, and we appreciate all the feedback we've gotten. Mostly been positive, but even negative critiques, things we can do better. We appreciate that. Though we are kind of hard-headed, at least Dustin and I, we're going to keep saying things wrong. Jim says things wrong just because he says things wrong, but Dustin and I, we're kind of jerks and we're hard-headed, I guess.
That's just the country coming out in me. I just want to say thanks to everybody for following through with us. Like I said, we had that little bit of hiatus. It was unannounced. I missed the last episode due to my son being sick, so we just appreciate all the people listening in and supporting us, and we appreciate all the feedback, especially all the positivity, like Jason said. So just keep going. If anyone has any ideas for us, feel free to send them our way, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Dustin, anything you want to say to close out?
Just keep getting those games in, and thanks for following us and keeping up with that, and keep looking forward to the next stuff that's coming out.
With that, we're going to sign off. Thanks again to everybody. Hopefully we'll have another episode in a couple weeks. We'll just see as our lives hopefully start to settle down, slow down a little bit after the holidays. If we can all stay healthy and keep our voices, not be coughing too much, then we'll hopefully be recording in a couple weeks. Thank you again.